It was a dark and stormy night, and Kira was all alone as she hailed an Uber. She just wanted to get home safely, but little did she know her driver was a notorious serial killer. As she got into the car, she noticed that the driver, a man in his mid-30s, had a sinister smile on his face. Despite her instincts telling her to get out, Kira chose to ignore them and put her trust in the rideshare service. The drive started off normal, with small talk and general pleasantries, but it quickly took a turn for the worse. Kira noticed the driver kept checking his rearview mirror and taking turns that seemed intentional to prolong the ride. Suddenly the driver pulled over and told Kira to get out. Kira was frozen with fear and didn't know what to do. The driver got out of the car and approached her, revealing a knife. He whispered to her, "I've been watching you, Kira. I know all your secrets. You're mine now." Kira screamed and tried to run, but the killer was too quick. He caught her, overpowered her, and locked her in the trunk of the car. As the killer drove to his secret hideaway, Kira tried to find a way to escape, but she was too afraid and helpless, trapped in the dark, cramped trunk. The killer's cackling laughter echoed in her ears as she realized her fate. The next morning, the police found Kira's body in the trunk of the abandoned Uber, brutally murdered by the rideshare driver, who was actually a serial killer. The authorities couldn't believe how easily he blended in, hiding in plain sight as a seemingly normal rideshare driver. As the investigation continued, it was revealed that the killer had multiple victims, all young women who he lured into his car with the guise of a safe ride home. The police worked tirelessly to catch him, but he always seemed to be one step ahead, slipping through their fingers like a ghost. But the story doesn't end there. The killer is still out there, waiting for his next unsuspecting victim. Who will be next, and will the authorities be able to catch him before he strikes again? The police soon discovered that the killer was not only a skilled driver, but also a tech genius. He had hacked into the Uber app, changing his identity and hiding his tracks every time he committed a murder. Despite their efforts, the killer continued to elude the authorities. He seemed to have a sixth sense, always knowing when they were getting close. And with each passing day, the city was gripped by fear as more young women went missing. One day, a young woman named Lisa went missing after taking an Uber ride. Her friends and family frantically searched for her, but all they could find was a cryptic message on her phone, sent from an unknown number. The message simply read, "I have her. You'll never see her again." The police were stumped. They couldn't trace the message back to the killer, and all of their leads had gone cold. It seemed as though the killer was untouchable. But Lisa was not like the other victims. She was a skilled hacker herself, and she had managed to send a message for help before being taken by the killer. The police teamed up with her friends and family, and together they worked tirelessly to crack the code and find her before it was too late. As they delved deeper into the digital underworld, they discovered a dark and twisted world where the killer played by his own rules. But they were determined to bring him to justice, and in the end, they did. With a combination of clever detective work and cutting-edge technology, they were able to track down the killer and bring him to justice. Lisa was rescued and reunited with her loved ones, and the city could finally breathe a sigh of relief. But the memory of the serial killer lingered on, serving as a reminder of the evil that can lurk behind even the most familiar and trusted of faces. And for those who were close to the case, the fear would never truly go away. The trial of the serial killer was a sensation. The media was fixated on every detail of the case, and the public was eager for justice to be served. In court, the killer was unrepentant and showed no remorse for his crimes. He claimed that he was driven by a twisted sense of love and obsession, and that he saw his victims as his possessions. Despite his lack of remorse, the evidence against him was overwhelming. The police had pieced together a meticulous timeline of his crimes, and the tech community had come together to help track down the source of his online presence. In the end, the killer was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The public breathed a collective sigh of relief, feeling that justice had finally been served. But even as the killer was locked away, the memory of his evil deeds continued to haunt the city. Parents were more cautious about who they trusted with their children, and young women were more wary of getting into a car with a stranger. And as the years went by, the killer became a legend, a cautionary tale about the dangers of the digital age and the evil that can lurk behind even the most innocent of faces. His name became synonymous with fear, and his story was retold over and over again as a warning to future generations. But even as the killer was locked away, rumors persisted that he was still out there, orchestrating his evil plans from behind bars. And for those who knew the truth, the fear would never truly go away. Years passed and the city moved on, but the memory of the serial killer lingered on. The police force had been praised for their work on the case, and many of the detectives who worked on the case had gone on to successful careers. However, as time went on, strange rumors began to surface. Some claimed that the killer had never actually been caught, and that he was still out there, hiding in plain sight and waiting for the right moment to strike again. Others whispered that he had somehow managed to escape from prison and was now on the run, seeking revenge against those who had brought him to justice. Despite the rumors, the police maintained that the killer was behind bars and that the public was safe. But for some, the fear was too real to ignore. They lived in constant fear, always looking over their shoulder, wondering if the killer was coming for them next. And then, one day, a young woman was found murdered in her home, her body mutilated in a way that was eerily familiar. The police were stumped, as all evidence pointed to the killer being locked away in prison. But as the investigation continued, they discovered a shocking truth. The killer had an accomplice, a twisted follower who was intent on continuing his evil legacy. And now this new killer was out there, stalking the streets and hunting for his next victim. The city was plunged into fear once again, as the police frantically searched for the killer before it was too late. And for those who were close to the case, the fear would never truly go away. The legacy of the serial killer lived on, a reminder of the evil that can lurk behind even the most innocent of faces. His search for the killer was intense, but despite the efforts of the police, he remained elusive. The city was on edge as the killer seemed to be taunting the authorities, leaving cryptic messages at the scenes of his crimes. Meanwhile, the former detective who had led the original investigation into the serial killer was haunted by the thought that his work had not been enough. He was consumed with guilt, feeling that he had failed the victims and their families. But as he delved deeper into the case, he began to uncover evidence that suggested that the killer may not have been working alone after all. He uncovered a network of accomplices, all connected to the original killer, and all driven by the same twisted urge to continue his legacy. The former detective was determined to bring the killer to justice, no matter the cost. He worked tirelessly, risking his own life to uncover the truth. And then one day the killer was finally caught. The former detective had finally succeeded where others had failed, and the city breathed a sigh of relief. But even as the killer was brought to justice, the former detective was left with a chilling realization. The legacy of the serial killer was not over, as there were others out there who shared his twisted urge to continue his evil work. And so, the former detective knew that his work was never truly done, as he remained vigilant, always searching for the next serial killer who threatened to bring terror to the city.